All right, we're going to start a little bit early. It's 6:19, 11/18, 2022. A few days away from the possible return of John F. Kennedy, possibly Jr. I'm not sure if he's going to go for that VP position. I think Kerry Lake is taking it. Imagine being the son of JFK with this plan to take down the deep state. You've been hiding from the public for 20 some years. You're ready to come back and take your position, and then Trump gives it to Kerry Lake. Like, I can understand being upstaged by a Kanye West, but uh, possibly, I don't know, Kanye West, possibly. He may even be running for president. I've heard some credible rumors. Anyway, if you're looking at the screen, that is an IPS tote bag available on Amazon. It's a unicursal penguin drawn with one line, including the wrench, and it's stocked with looks like cheesy poofs, popcorn, and some kind of nacho snack. My point is, this is a go bag for the brave new world. They don't really bomb you. You don't need ammunition. You don't need any kind of survival gear. You don't need a first aid kit. You need really good popcorn. This is white popcorn. Now, this is from Nicotromus. My bug out bag is ready, he says. All of my prepping work is complete. I'm prepared for anything, including World War III, Elvis flying through the Space Needle on 6/11, the next variant of cooties, San Andreas fault line busting, Cascadia fault line busting, New Madrid fault line busting, fake Trump assassination 8/4, Vaxageddon, Kamala Harris 2024, Trump 2024, Ivanka 2028, mud flood, weaponized space junk, Nibiru, chemical apocalypse. Oh, chemtrail apocalypse. That sounds feasible. Anyway, he goes on. Solar flares, climate change, 5G, Walmart, FEMA camps. And I've been saying since 2020, your real choice here is popcorn or ammunition. If you're reaching for ammunition, they got you in their nightmare fantasy. You're LARPing. If you're reaching for popcorn, you understand the game. And it has never been clearer than today, right now, today. Look at these headlines side by side. Ukraine is building wooden HIMAR decoys to fool Russia. The deception is working so well that Russia claims to have destroyed more HIMARS to the US than they even had. In other words, decoy rocket launchers to fool the Russians into wasting missiles. Well, look on the other side. Russia fired a dummy nuke today in a warning that they could do the real thing. Russia fired a cruise missile with a mock warhead. So I'm like, wait a minute here. Dummy missiles against decoy rocket launchers. Is any of this not a LARP? And this is why I'm saying your bug out bag doesn't need to include iodine and a radioactive waste protective suit. You really just need to have really good snacks. And in New York, they were saying get a go bag for nukes. Yet their instructions didn't involve going anywhere. It involved finding the center of your house and gathering around the TV and waiting for instructions from the media. But again, these are headlines from The Sun. Russia fired dummy nuke missile in sinister warning. I was actually asking that question when they first brought up these dummy rocket launchers, saying that the Russians were wasting their rockets. I'm like, are you sure the Russians aren't reading your papers? It's on your front page that you're fooling them, you're tricking them. You think they're not going to read that? And then I started asking, what are the odds that they're not using dummies and decoys on the other side as well? And then what does that mean? What does it mean if both sides are using dummies? It means that the public is being duped. The deception is working so well that Russia claims to have destroyed more HIMARS than the U.S. even sent to the Ukraine. These are these rocket launching, missile launching vehicles that were made out of plywood, spray painted olive drab, and were supposedly being used to cause the Russians to waste very expensive missiles. I'll go through some comments here. I sent out text notifications, and many of you may have noticed, and we'll get into all of this. There are so many topics. We could talk about the fake war, rip Russian vids, may get into that. Then, of course, the Discord server was pulled, and there were several servers. So if you're not aware, we called this. Back when the Buffalo shooting happened, they killed my Twitch and all of my socks because they said I was a ban evader. Like, well, this killer who thinks we're running out of white people shoots up a supermarket on the other side of the country, and he had a Discord account and a Twitch account. I'm like, uh-oh. Boom, they took our Twitch. And I figured as a matter of time, just maybe months or maybe even, I figured it was just a few months before eventually they would crack down on private conversations, flagging keywords like they do everywhere else. Because Discord's kind of semi-private. You have to be invited for the most part. Anyhow, Discord is now exhibiting the same types of patterns of behaviors we've seen with these other platforms. For example, Lloyd Miller was banned. And what they do is they target your personal account, and any server you opened goes down with it. They took out this account and it pulled down the chat. No big deal, the main research facility is still open. I have several deepfakes of myself. Nobody knows which account's the real one. And that's because I knew this was going to happen eventually. It happened a couple years ago. We were prepared for it. No big deal, we have a new account. If you go to ips.monster, you will always have the most recent links. And we're building back faster. And I'm pretty sure I know who's behind it. And I took some actions today, which I probably shouldn't talk about live. I mean, I'll talk about it in the Discord server, but what I mean by live is that nobody's all that interested in $10,000 worth of MAGA hats burning. But all right, let's move on here. Joined by Cubstar, Tina Marie, Vic Tree, Salty Siren. I hear there's new emojis on YouTube. I see that in the comments. I'll be checking those out. Again, none of us here are fans of the platform, but we use all the platforms because we're everywhere. However, the hub will always be ips.monster. And right now we're hosting our chat in Discord. Just opened up a new one. And this one is probably more secure than the last one. I have no worries about this at all. But if they were to nuke it, I would simply move to Gilded. And from there somewhere else. But, you know, we're always moving. We have been a moving target this entire time. It is a think tank, not an echo chamber. Also joined here by Infinite Jack, Garrett Summers, AJ206 says signal received. You know, eventually we're going to have a real signal. You know, like they do on the anniversary of 9/11, 88 spotlights. Only we're going to shape it into the face of that special penguin up there. A beacon. GCF says IPS Discord down. Look, the main one that has all of our research, not going down. The other one, the auxiliary, the 24/7 cross-platform omni-chat think tank, yeah, that went down, sadly. In the future, though, I am going to be exporting the chats and publishing them. And this is going to be more prevalent in the future as we start recording more of our live chats after hours. We're doing a lot of after hours live chats, which is another reason to join the think tank. It's a voice room, and you know, we talk about a lot of things, but anyway, I'll be taking a lot of those recordings and putting them into the 24/7. All right, Victory says Dave Chappelle 2024. Yep, Dave Chappelle is definitely, in my view, an insider. If you look at 2020 and his role with the whole 846 narrative, he's definitely an insider. Not a sellout. Big difference. And all these government jesters are kind of suspect in my view, but a lot of people accuse Dave Chappelle of having somehow sold out along the way. And I think what may have happened is maybe they didn't realize when they first watched him the political undertones. Maybe they didn't understand the dog whistles or the catering to the establishment that he does. Like, a lot of these guys to me are just guardrails to keep people laughing at the right things and scoffing at the right things. Comedy has little to do with it. They just want to make sure you're putting the connections together in the proper way. We're joined here by Lane Dion with the bowl of bat soup, which the bat soup emojis were banned from YouTube, if you weren't aware. Like 2020, they actually did prohibit you from having a bat emoji next to a bowl of soup. And that's because it's code for, you know, the source of the scam. When the WHO had Munchausen syndrome by proxy and then rewarded people for LARPing along with it. I mean, a world of crisis actors, bad ones. And I would say woefully underpaid. I mean, how many of you got more than $1,200 in stimmy for how many times did you have to put on that costume? Get in character. Junder says, are you coming back to Spotify? Yes. Yes, I'm going back to all. That's another thing, too. They cut us off of like 40 some platforms. I lost all my reviews. I especially missed the 1-star review where that guy said I was the Steve Ducey of Alex Jones's and not to listen to me. I'm like, yeah, that's perfect. I like reviews, and they burned those because they burn books, they burn servers. I mean, that's what they do. Like, burn back better is what it's really about. They're not building anything, not that I've seen. It's quite the opposite. But yes, there are going to be copies of Infinite Plane Radio on all the podcasting platforms. Just search. In fact, you can find us on every single one. I think Spotify took me out because maybe it's because we keep talking about where their headquarters is at. You know, they're headquartered at the One World Trade Tower. They're there at the Tower of Babel itself. 1,776 feet high, opened on 11/3/2014, 13 years after 9/11. But the significance of that piece of architecture really can't be overstated. And that's where they are. It makes perfect sense to me. And of course, another thing, I had more than 4,000 subscribers, and most of them weren't aware we even had video. We were reaching people. And whenever we reach people at a certain level, they tend to find ways to shut us down. But as always, we adapt, and we have adapted. I'm glad it happened. I'm actually pleased that they deplatformed me, because what it did is it forced us to create a new way to reconstitute, and in a way that doesn't ever have a possibility of toppling. And that is the YouTube channel that's safe. It's called Infinite Plane Society. You can search for it. That's the handle. And I'm just uploading videos of, well, video blogs. I'm talking and I'm drawing pictures. That's it. I'm keeping it apolitical. In fact, I was recording a video blog today about printers. Like, that's how safe it is. And the idea is we get this safe channel up to 10,000 subs. And then, of course, once we have that critical raft, we can direct it anywhere. We can direct it to any one of our correspondents, all the while maintaining a clean facade. Kind of like the Blue Lodge of the Masons. Oh yeah, you can trust us. We're just here for charity. Meanwhile, backstage, they're who knows what. Conspiring. Diana Southard says, hi there. By the way, DLive chat isn't working tonight. Okay, we have two DLive channels. One is Infinite Plane Radio, and one is Infinite Plane .radio. Now, if it's not working, I'll try a reboot, but I'm pretty sure the Chi-Coms control that platform, and they hate us. You remember, they did demonetize, and they gave me an X rating. In fact, I just went to infiniteplane.radio on DLive, and it says, please select your age group. The content, okay, I'm 18 and over. I can watch this X-rated channel. And I assure you, I'm fully clothed here. I don't know, I don't deserve the X rating. To me, this is actually defamation. And I'll deal with that later. Okay, it's there. It's working. There are 4 viewers over there at infiniteplane.radio. And thank you to, looks like McDirt, for the 33 lemons. Lemons are the currency of DLive. All right, let us continue. Joined by, Lean Dion says, was dope catching up with y'all. That's right. You know, you catch people all around the world in the Discord server. It's a great place. And we were talking about what we actually had that they burned, you know, the other server. We had a server where up to 200 people, 220 people were members, but there'd be about 40 people on at a time. And we'd have 3, 4, 5-hour conversations with half a dozen or more people on all kinds of topics. These were being recorded or transcribed, or we're just basically creating a record here. And I thought, you know, this is kind of like a library. It's an organic creation. It's not top down, and it's human intel. And we're just compiling a lot of our information and ideas and allowing these ideas to gestate and evolve. And they burned it down. And that's what we're dealing with. I mean, how are we not just philosophers more than ideologues? Or, I mean, what I'm doing here has nothing to do with incitement. I'm not an election denialist. I believe in elections. You know, I don't suggest that people should revolt against their government or whatever. It's like, no, I'm sorry. Like, I think it's ridiculous that some people think that if we don't have a certain number of AR-15s per capita, the government's going to take over. I'm sorry, they already took over a long time ago. That's what government is. They've taken over at such a level, it's far deeper than they might take your guns or they might poke you with a needle you don't want. It's so much deeper, it's subconscious. They control people's souls. It's basically collective soul hypnosis. That's what the TV's for. The black cube that everybody tunes into. Now, let's see here. Speaking of black cubes and the collective hypnosis of humanity, I mentioned how they burn back better. And one note on that. The whole Build Back Better thing in the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum openly puts the 666 on hands when they talk about implants. It's in their logo. They're synonymous with the Great Reset that started with the Great Conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, and it marks the new astrological age. They are really, for all intents and purposes, the visible face of the cult that runs this world. That's why they're introducing Gaia, this global AI alliance, which is some sort of like AI assisted government or some kind of phasing out, I think, the input of humans. None of it is accidental. And it all does coincide with this other astrological event, the return of Pluto. I mean, this return of Pluto has a connection also to the One World Trade Tower, the 1776 connection, because Pluto returned to the point where it was at the birth of this nation. And right now, for the next 4 days, we're still in Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto. And I'm expecting I'm not expecting anything drastic necessarily, but if anything is going to go down with nukes, it would happen at this time. That's why I think it's somewhat noteworthy here that Putin actually launched a nuke, albeit a dummy. I mean, it's literally that. I mean, take a look at this. Russia fired a dummy nuke missile, cruise missile with a mock warhead, Ukraine building wooden decoys to fool Russia. It's 100% clown world. Nuke fears. Again, the whole thing is about fear. Like, they don't actually have to blow anything up if they can just scare you. Nuke fears. Russia fired dummy nuke missile. And if they had everybody in lockdown, what difference does it make? We did a documentary on this channel a couple of years ago called Drilled about how the hyper-realistic school shooting drills were actually just an excuse to do MK Ultra, to traumatize the kids. And I made the case. I mean, look, you could find many examples of people actually getting hurt, malfeasance, emotional abuse, the situations they put them in. One of the more interesting ones is when one student is locked out and they can't let that person in because then everybody dies. Preparation for quarantine. My point is the systematic traumatizing of an entire generation with this new duck and cover because the bowl cut shooters come in. It's Stockholm Syndrome inducing because you're made to fear guns, but then your saviors have the really big guns and the black uniforms. But now here's the interesting point. Because I think about this, Russia just pretends to nuke Ukraine. If they thought it was real for even 10 minutes, it would probably give a few people a heart attack. Now listen to this. For the last few months, there have been a number of prank calls, largely instigated by TikTok, which is part of the agenda here. But these calls were made to various schools across the country, claiming there was an active shooter, causing the schools to go into lockdown. Now, this is no different than a regular lockdown drill. You don't know it's real. The whole point of it is you don't know. The whole point of it is it could be real. You can't open the door. You hide under your desk and you hope it's not real. And you can find many examples of students actually experiencing PTSD. The media has reported on this. Students having nightmares. Students are literally having the effects of trauma-induced mind control. And when I called this out in the documentary, interestingly enough, two of the biggest teachers unions at the same time came out against hyper-realistic shooter drills. I was like, wait, why are these school teachers unions coming out against these things all of a sudden? Even that politician, there was a couple, he made it part of his political platform. It was Andrew Yang. And I'm just saying, it was convenient all of a sudden. Then COVID happened and it no longer mattered. Now they're obviously bringing them back. But now, here's the thing. They admit tacitly that they are abusing the kids without actually admitting it. This is a headline from Bangor Daily News. Maine's school shooting reports were a hoax, but the trauma is real. Swatting hoaxes require a swift response and trigger panic and anxiety. These are just as impactful as real shooting threats. Now, they're mad that the students are being traumatized by strangers pranking them. They would rather the principal organizes this. Tuesday morning started like any other school day, blah, blah. Let me go back to where it says here. Here it is. The state schools have been hit by shooting and bomb threats before, but this was their first experience with swatting. Swatting has been on the rise since schools have returned to normal operations after pandemic prompted shutdowns. Now, what's interesting here is they're not even having to schedule drills. They're just scheduling swattings. It's the same thing. Swatting is distinct from a threat, but it prompts the same response. Anyway, this has been an ongoing story, and it does tie in to TikTok because they're suggesting that a TikTok craze caused this. Now they're just connecting the spread of memes on TikTok to literal terrorism. Do these drills even work? Like, weren't they doing a drill in Parkland the day of the shooting? It's like all that practice, even up to the last minute. All right, let us continue. This is, again, says, oh, here we go. This is the main line. Unfortunately, the ability to hide a phone number or use the internet to spread false reports of shooters makes it more difficult to hold people accountable. There you go. Part of the story here is we can't have anonymous people anymore. Look what happens. Battery 79 says teachers' unions are communist propagandists. Yeah, no doubt about that. I was just pointing out that they were almost like having to step it back because what we were saying with our documentary was so on point. As if they care about traumatizing the kids. Like this is exactly going according to plan. This might be a convenient way to make it even more realistic. Now they don't have any sort of warning. Oh, we're going to do a drill later today. Every one of these shootings starts off the same. Oh, we thought it was the drill. Then they told us it wasn't a drill. Okay, makes sense. Shooting hoax plunges Maine school into chaos and terror. Not knowing what was true or what was going on was scary, said Aaron, whose daughter was put in lockdown. Again, it's just terrorism. And if you support these hyper-realistic school shooting drills, then you're supporting terrorism. I'm just saying. And the reason why that's significant is that a lot of people will say, how dare you say these things are fake? And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm speaking out against child abuse. You have a problem with that? Do you want to have kids ducking and covering and actually experiencing the effects of terrorism and from a threat that doesn't even exist? I mean, what if they start doing meteor drills or, asteroids? Like, look, there's going to be some space junk today, space junk drills. When you hear this siren, go into the basement. Battery 79 says nukes are a hoax. True. They don't have to exist. They can launch a dummy nuke and accomplish the same thing. This is Jussie Smollett world. Globe Theater says not shocked. Sleepy Randa says 9 out of 10 times it's fake, so if you always say it's fake, you're right 90% of the time. Yes. Look, when we reach the 51%, you can shift the burden of proof back to the media. It's like I can flip a coin and I'm right more often than not. The point of it is, I'm just thinking, you can't give them the benefit of the doubt. Make them show you proof. And where is the proof? I ask for it, and it's like, oh, okay, well, here's a dummy. Here's a LARP. Or, as Les Luthor pointed out, 13,000 of the most popular TikTok videos referring to Ukraine were from video games. Like the frame of reference people have for the so-called war, video games. All right, let's see here. AnxG says, so is the SBF FTX scandal a central bank drill? I think so. The names say it all, bank man. Goldman Sachs, Bernie Madoff. Goldman Sachs is Bernie Madoff. These things are not coincidental names. And then you can even find a physical resemblance between Bernie Madoff and this Bank Fried man. Let me go, or Bankman Fried. Let me see if I can find it here. Yes, I do have an image. Yeah, this is to me very scripted, and the agenda remains to be seen. But I think obviously it's controlled opposition. These characters are designed to fall. I think he's the face, obviously, of something else. But like you're supposed to believe it. I saw this article in Forbes. They called him the devil in nerds' clothes. And of course, they're going to put somebody like that in front. It's like the same reason they put Don Petite in front of the ISS. Like, you wouldn't want to punch a guy with glasses. They're going to pull off something really big that's going to trigger a lot of people. Maybe they want to put somebody in front that's going to be kind of like unassuming. Now, this is interesting. Here we have Trudeau and the Prime Minister Sunak talking to Zelensky's voicemail about the missile and how traumatizing it was. And this is when they thought the missile was an attack from Russia against Poland, or what was it? Or no, I think it was a missile from Poland. I'll have to get the whole story, but listen to this first.
President Zelensky, please go ahead. You're online.
Hello, Vladimir. It's Rishi and Justin. I really wanted you to hear from us as friends.
We absolutely know how difficult yesterday was. It was horrific for you and your country, and we have called it out in the session that we've just had and on the media here this morning, and we made that point loud and clear.
Again, we're talking about the missile that hit southeast Poland, and it was blamed on Russia, and I think it wasn't the case after the fact, but here they are reacting. And these are all just crisis actors.
To everyone who was here, that what your country had to live through yesterday was unacceptable and represented yet more barbarity from the Russians. We stood united in condemning it.
Rishi and I really wanted to reach out to reassure you, to show you we're standing with you, and to say we're gonna figure out this step.
Why aren't they wearing masks? Why aren't they 6 feet apart? All these hypocrites, they should still be living up to these things that they originally stood for. All right, well, World War III has trended so many times. I've got World War III fatigue. I'm not even fazed by any of it. Civil War, World War III, it's to the point where they've burnt it out. And I was suggesting a month ago, if Putin doesn't drop a nuke, it's just a bluff, and that's the main thing. That's the whole point of it. That is, it's not. It doesn't have to be real. It just has to be believable to the masses, and it always works. They just refer you to some old footage. It's just the threat of it is sufficient, I think, to cow most people. I mean, I kind of take it for granted that people are true believers, that the elite have some button they can push and just shut everything down. Like today, I saw this article about how the White House is in discussions on how they might be able to block out the sun in order to cure climate change. Like literally blocking out the sun. And, to me, this is just science fiction. Like they would like for you to believe that we have the power to shut out the sun if we want to. And if they can get you to accept that, then how much easier is it for you to accept the idea that your consumption of dino juice is responsible for the ocean levels rising? Now, this is a short clip here. It's a group of scientists giving CPR to a globe, and this is at the COP27.
Our patient is dying! Our patient is dying! The planet Earth is dying! Help! Help! Our patient is losing blood! Planet Earth is losing fossil fuels! Help! 911! Code red for humanity!
Code red for humanity. Call 911. The Earth is losing fossil fuels.
What is the climate crisis? A health crisis! What is the therapy? Climate justice! Help! Help! Our patient is dying! Planet Earth is losing blood! Help!
Again, if this is a real thing, would they need to stage these theatrics to sell it? Why do they need cringe theater and PR stunts? People setting themselves on fire, gluing themselves to paintings, throwing orange paint on things in order to make us believe in this. It would be self-evident. They wouldn't need all this. Sleepy Random says the only thing missing is Staying Alive blaring in the background. Oh yes, you're referring to, of course, the performance art piece on Halloween in Seoul, where they were simulating a mass trampling by doing CPR on dummies, synchronized CPR, to the tune of Staying Alive. Again, she says, planet Earth is losing blood. Help.
1.5 to survive! 1.5 to survive! Help!
All right. A little bit of communist street theater. Okay, let's continue. This is, someone brought this up today. This is another Greta, only they've repackaged it. Now, this Greta, I think, is meant to be taken more seriously. It's a little older. Its name is Sophia, which is kind of reminiscent of the robot Sophia, and it essentially has the same message. Now, what this climate activist does here is it accuses us of lying and says stop lying in every single language. I'll just go ahead and play a clip here. Name is Sophia. And this is at the COP27, where our world leaders are meeting after flying long flights, private jets, lots of fuel having been consumed, and all for the purposes of talking on how, discussing how they can reduce our use of things like jet fuel.
But doing another. Simply put, they are lying. Those are not my words, or the words of another youth climate activist.
Another youth climate activist. I think we know who she's talking about. Greta was, how dare you. Sophia is, stop lying.
No. Those are the words of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. To stop lying. Or, as our youth volunteers translated for me, in Arabic, kafan il kadbi, stop lying. Or in Mandarin, dingje shuahong, stop lying. Or in French, arrête de mentir. Or Russian, prekretivat. Or Spanish, deja de mentir. Whatever the language, we need leaders to stop lying.
Okay, well, we need you, as a climate leader, to tell all those little Harry Potters running around to stop throwing orange paint on stuff. Think about the carbon footprint that leaves, the cleanup trucks, the water, and everything else. World's top climate scientists told to cover up the fact that the Earth's temperature hasn't risen for the last 15 years. That's why they stopped calling it global warming. Leaked United Nations report reveals the world's temperature hasn't risen for the last 15 years. Now, I will give them this. The ocean levels did rise by 1 millimeter in 2021, but that's because of all the PPE that people threw into the oceans because nobody knew to put them into red biohazard containers. Strangely. Like they give you blue baskets or buckets to put your recyclables in. I don't. They give you those to recycle. Why couldn't they have given us red biohazard containers for our biohazardous waste? The PPE and the masks. Nope. We threw it with the municipal trash so it goes into the ocean, and now there are entire islands made of masks and PPE just floating around, COVID islands everywhere. And nobody cares. I care because it's raising the oceans a little bit. But now they're concerned, of course, with outer space. Space junk's the new current thing for the current thingers. The current thingers have this shiny new object syndrome. Saving the whales? Nah. Saving outer space? Yeah. I'm like, okay. They really don't care. They're like wind-up dolls. They just get pointed in a certain direction. Throw paint on that. Blame this person. And destroying the art makes no sense. You know, if you really want to motivate somebody or have people pay attention to something, show them evidence. Destroying stuff just, well, I mean, it's typical of communists, of course. Burn back better. All right, let us continue here. This is RIP Russian Vids. Yes, Russian Vids is no longer Russian Vids. And at first I thought it was going to become Ukraine Vids. I thought maybe he didn't want to be associated with that whole thing with Putin. But no, now he's They Live Truth. You could find him on YouTube. I know his Russian vids was taken down. Maybe he changed it because he felt targeted. Like I could change from infinite plane if I wanted to avoid being targeted. It would make some level of sense. But just heads up, Russian vids is no more. They live truth. Easy to remember. Okay, let's continue here. David A. Pryor says Al Gore already won. New York City wasn't underwater in 2012. Yeah, Al Gore is a big false prophet, the man bear pig. But, he didn't even start it. But, the whole global warming thing was coined like 34 years ago. Before that, you had this. This is Captain Spock. And of course, if they play a scientist on TV, you can trust them. Here he is talking about how the world is cooling because of you.
It has advanced and retreated with clockwork regularity. If we are unprepared for the next advance, the result could be hunger and death on a scale unprecedented in all of history. What scientists are telling us now is that the threat of an ice age is not as remote as they once thought.
The threat of an ice age is not as remote as they once thought. Okay, another threat, something to be afraid of, but...
During the lifetime of our grandchildren, Arctic cold and perpetual snow could turn most of the inhabitable portions of our planet into a polar desert.
In 1977, the worst winter in a century struck the United States.
This is back from 1977 about how the world was going to become a polar desert, and that didn't happen. David A. Pryor says there's a Y2K survival video starring Leonard Nimoy. Yeah, and he does the hand sign, which you see on the Devil Tarot card, which we may get into some of that symbolism. Very interesting character, Leonard Nimoy, but more specifically in Star Trek has a great deal of significance for the world view we've been given with the whole outer space. What do you want to call it? Utopianism is generally the word I use. Outer space utopianism. Space communism. Let's play some more of this vintage fear porn. And this is from 1977 about the Ice Age. That didn't happen. All right, Twitter's not playing for some reason. Musk must have fired that guy. Let's move on to the next meme. They don't make rockets like they used to. 1969, 3 days to the moon. 2022, 6 days to the moon. I don't know if that's valid or not. I'm sure they have a good reason. Although, my opinion is the reason they don't go to the moon with people is because their special effects aren't good enough yet. They want to have some special effects they can stand by for decades. Look how bad Apollo 11 is aged. Like literally nobody thinks that looks real if they've critically examined it. People assume it's real from textbooks, but if they actually watch it, yeah, they can tell it's a joke. Most can. They're not in 1/6 Earth's gravity. They're in slow motion. Big difference. Saturn rocket, Saturn V. And the new one is called Orion. 322 feet high. 322, of course, is the Skull and Bone Society number, which has great significance, of course, to Saturn and death, or even Kronos, or even Osiris. And, of course, Orion, the constellation, was Osiris to the Egyptians. And there's a strong correlation here, I'm just saying, between the god of the earth, represented by the obelisk, whether you call him Saturn, or Orion, or Osiris, or Baal. It's the same thing. And this whole mission to the moon is an occult ritual, the great rite of witchcraft. It is the earth god, sky goddess, or the lunar goddess. It's all ritual. And if you're not familiar with the Masonic symbolism inherent within NASA launches, and specifically their big accidents like the Challenger, I highly recommend the writings of William Cooper. And William Cooper, I think, really was the first one to decode Apollo on this level. He calls it the NASA Masonic Conspiracy, Apollo missions and the Masonic symbols. Very compelling material here. And what's more, the symbolism he describes, the use of the number 13 in the Phoenix, or the timestamp 113, a lot of this stuff has been used again. And for example, he's referring here to Apollo 13 named Aquarius blows up at 113. It was an explosion on it. And he says here, 13 is the number of death and rebirth, reincarnation, sacrifice, the phoenix. Now, he goes on to talk about the Challenger explosion, and he doesn't mention it here, but the Challenger exploded at 1 minute and 13 seconds. I'm like, there's a interesting story here that's emerging. And then, of course, 13, the number of death and rebirth. Well, what happened after the Twin Towers went down? 13 years later. They almost called the new tower the Phoenix, the World Trade Center Phoenix. You can find this on Wiki. It would have been too obvious with the symbolism, I think. But they opened it up on 11/3, 13 years later. So there's your number 13 and 113 all over again. This is just one example, but the way he describes it from the very beginning, this is from William Cooper. To make interstellar travel believable, NASA was created. The Apollo space program foisted the idea that man could travel to and walk upon the moon. Every Apollo mission was carefully rehearsed and filmed in large sound stages at the Atomic Energy Commission's top secret test site in the Nevada desert, in a secured and guarded soundstage at the Walt Disney Studios, within which was a huge mock-up of the moon. If you want to find a link to that, I'll post it at minds.com/infiniteplanesociety. Anything we discuss here eventually ends up over there at Minds. All right, let us continue. We're talking about these moon missions. Going through my Twitter account. Now this is interesting. It's a little blue pill politics, but this is from Jared Sexton. Reagan was the pitchman for destroying the social safety net, eradicating the New Deal, redistributing wealth from the bottom up, and creating human inequality. His mythology is a prison we've yet to escape. I'm just bringing this up because with all these characters, they're designed to be villains to one side, heroes to the other. It's become especially clear in the last few years just how much of what we're seeing is 100% scripted theater. And the hopium is off the charts. It's flying off the shelves. Is there any left? People are just snatching it up. For example, this is a piece of hopium circulating from, I get all my info from Q Street, from real sources. Here's what they think. Pelosi's gone. Republicans have the House. That's why Q said a clean House was necessary. It meant to remove Pelosi, Speaker of the House, second in line to presidency. This way they can install him. What they're saying here is that Trump was prophesied by Q to be installed as the Speaker of the House. Then the FTX scandal shows us taxpayer money being funneled to the Ukraine or from the Dems' pockets. In other words, money laundering. That this will result in the Bidens being removed. And means, of course, quote, allowing Trump as Speaker of the House to ascend to president organically. All for the masses, no coincidence, the stage is set. Trump's not announcing 2024. What they were saying is he was announcing 2023. That's their hopium. Trump's about to come back. I have someone else. This is an actual true believer if you want to hear it. I mean, it sounds crazy in your own head when you read it in all caps, but let's listen to a true believer.
Trump never said he was running for president. He also never said 2024. People aren't paying attention to that. He said we're in the whirlwind of the storm. He said that Pelosi is fired and she's on her way to another country. Huh. Weird.
What they mean is they believe when Trump says fired, it's referring to execution by firing squad. Other country, Gitmo. Right out of 2016 or 2017 is when it started. Like they really started this whole thing about, oh yeah, these people are all being arrested secretly. This is the war in the deep state. It's all resurfacing. This is bad hopium, but you can see it's potent.
If Pelosi's fired, what's Trump really running for anyways? Possibly Speaker of the House?
She's got Q-itis. Everything they say comes in the form of a question. Really, really annoying.
Oh, I said that. And then he said I'm going to put an order into Congress that's going to change everything for humanity. Then he talked about the elections. And he said the elections will be fair and rightly done and quick and easy elections. That sounds like new election announcement to me. But y'all keep looking in all the wrong places. And
So glad I found this Twitter account. All right, now we know. Again, Not Shock says hopium addiction. I think so. I think people are addicted to either doom or hope. Either one works. Yes, both of them are equally kind of bad in my view. It's like it's just this carrot chasing, and it never ends. It's kind of crazy at this point to consider that they're taking Q posts from 4 years ago and aligning them to current events and suggesting that Q knew this would happen. I was like, wait a minute here. I can understand you saying that a few years ago, but now you're saying that Q knew this was going to happen. That means that Q knew that Trump was going to lose, knew that Biden was going to win. I mean, none of it, literally none of it adds up. This is a Twitter post from Les Luthor, Lezluthor, Artificial Harbor. He says, I'm almost certain now that all the iconic footage and events from World War II was simulated during training exercises, with most soldiers unknowingly taking part in a deception campaign that was revealed to them only after for operational security. Les Luthor has done some groundbreaking work as an illusion warfare correspondent, exposing just how much of what we've been told about Ukraine and Russia is absolutely fake. That's why I really had to point out today that Russia is sending dummy missiles to Ukraine, decoys. Dummies versus decoys. That's the threat. And it's not like it just started. They didn't just start faking the news when you started paying attention. When the Sandy thing happened, when people realized how the news media is totally reality TV combined with political agenda presented as news. No, it's always been this way. Why would we think World War II was any different? Here, Les has a video of a group of soldiers training for war, but this bit of footage often shows up as the real thing. John LeBon has pointed out many of these types of videos, like, for example, Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor, if you think about it, you can imagine the attack. You've probably seen it in school, you've seen it in videos, etc. But the fact is, most of the footage that you've seen is from recreations. They just don't always label it as such. They let you arrive at your own conclusions. Self-deception with their help. Kind of reminds me, this Artemis mission. Well, this Artemis mission thing, when it first started, they sent out, or they published a cartoon or an animation of the mission. Here's what it's going to do for 42 days. This is how it works. And this animation looked like the real thing to me. I'm like, as in what they show is real. In other words, I was thinking, how are the true believers in outer space travel going to distinguish between the simulation of the mission and the actual mission? How will they know the difference? And I don't think they would know unless it was properly contextualized. I mean, these are the people who fell for the space salami. Now, I'm just thinking, there's no way they can know the difference. Conveniently, NASA put a stamp on it that said animation. They had to label it animation so nobody would think it was the real thing. And it doesn't mean that our CGI is so advanced that you can't tell the difference. It means that the public has been visually dumbed down, that they can't tell the difference. Digital forensics could really bring down the ISS faster than a fake nuke. But no one's doing it. I mean, we are doing it. The media will never look critically at its own work. They don't like critics. All right, let me go ahead and continue. This is Elon Musk talking about AI and how they're summoning the demon. Have to bring this up because we're talking about Gaia and the World Economic Forum 666. And the thing is, Gaia is the name of the earth god. We're talking about the god of the earth, personified as Gaia, who's sort of a goddess, but whatever. At this point, everything's fluid. World Economic Forum launches new global initiative, and it's called Gaia, Global AI Action Alliance, to harness the transformative potential of artificial intelligence. Our alliance is accelerating responsible AI. Now, I'm bringing this up because they're bringing about this notion that you can create this perfected mind that isn't held in an actual physical brain in a human being with emotions and greed and someone who can be manipulated. No, this will be an objective mind that we can talk to for answers, like an oracle. This AI will be the new God. We've already been conditioned for it. It's in all the TV shows. And if they put it in TV enough, yeah, we will live it. I mean, you got to think about how moldable people are. 2020 was facilitated with fashion. They used a fashion statement to get everybody to conform to this new normal, a new ideology. Because fashion works with peer pressure. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's putting on the face diaper. You're standing out. Now it's you against the mob. Do you want that dynamic in your life, or are you just going to go with the flow? The fashion statement is what sold the whole thing. It wasn't because it was a medical device. All right, here's Musk commenting on Gaia.
I mean, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, you sure you can control the demon?
Yeah, we're summoning the demon. And the guys with the pentagrams and the holy water. Yeah, he's just suggesting that we can't control it.
Didn't work out. I mean, with artificial intelligence.
Lean Dion says China had PPE fashion shows. Oh yeah, we were talking about that in the Discord about the fashion, the role of fashion. And think about this too. Kanye West, fashion mogul, hanging out with Pluto or Future. Now, Future had made masks into a fashion statement back in 2017, or was it when did he put out that song, Masks Off? But making the mask into it was in 2017, into something of a fashion statement. And then he's there with Kanye West. These guys are associated, which is also notable because I've been talking about the connection between fashion and mind control. Using fashion to bring about, a fascist society. It's kind of fascinating. You can't really separate the two because you're talking about uniforms and uniformity and conformity. Now here you have, again, Future with the mask thing. And this is definitely 3 years ahead of its time. Came out on 4/18/2017. Of course, this year, it was on 4/18 that Judge Muzzle, who was appointed at the age of 33, she took down the mask mandates, if you remember that. Her name was was it Muzzle? It was Mazzell, but it looked like Muzzle. And I was like, okay, that's just too much. Judge Catherine Mazzell, who voided the travel mask. But it was on the anniversary of that song, Masks Off. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, Tim, how's it going?
It's going good. Is this Tim Truth?
Yes, it surely is.
Oh, good to hear from you.
Good to hear you live. I've been watching all your shows, but I haven't been catching you live, so it's good to finally catch one.
Awesome. Yeah, I've wanted to catch up with you. It's been a little while, and hopefully we can catch up. What have you been up to lately? For people who don't know, this is Tim Truth.
Go ahead.
Just want to clarify, this is the Tim Truth.
That's right. And I wanted to call in because your analysis has been so spot on. And I've seen this pattern over and over again. And you helped me connect some dots between Elon Musk and Kanye West. And I'm also seeing that they're basically playing off the Pied Piper and Pan. And so I just wanted to share a couple notes here.
Cool,
how they built the One World Trade Center? That looks like a huge syringe.
Undoubtedly, yeah. It's a big ass vax needle. Everybody points that out nowadays.
Yeah, well, and there were a bunch of contrived news stories. Do you remember these where they were like, it's making this weird whistling sound?
No, but go on. I'll look into that.
Oh yeah, you got to check those out, like Fox News especially. And the word syringe comes from the story of Pan and Syrinx from Greek mythology. Have you heard of that story?
No, but this is getting interesting. Please continue, because pandemic, and now you're talking about the origin of the word for syringe.
Yes, there was a character, Syrinx, who was a nymph, and Pan like practically was raping her, or she was trying to escape Pan's pursuit, and somehow she gets turned into a panpipe. She was turned into some reeds in the lake, and then Pan basically just like cut it up and turned it into a panpipe. And what's interesting is birds sing with their windpipes, which are called syrinx. That's the name after this character in Greek mythology. So birds singing comes from the same term that's connected with Pan. And so what's interesting is Twitter, the etymology comes from the sound of birds make when they sing. And the word pipe also comes from the sound that birds make in Greek. And so you brought up the great point of Starman on, then there's the K West on Bowie's album.
Yes.
And then the connection with Elon Musk sending Starman up, and it says, don't panic. And panic is a connection with Pan as well. I don't know if that makes sense. And
It
then
does.
One more thing.
It does. Go on.
The Twitter logo. Have you seen that it's made up of a bunch of circles? I think that that's representation of Pied Piper, which is also a Pan reference. So any thoughts on that? Because I'm trying to put together these pieces.
Now this is all getting very, very interesting. These connections are definitely valid. This thing about Pan, the syrinx, the syringe, very, very intriguing as it goes along with this whole pandemic. Pan meaning all, but again, the god Pan is another one of these earth gods. And when Jack Parsons was there at JPL when they were doing the rocket thing at the very beginning, he would read the Hymn to Pan before every rocket launch, which was a poem by Aleister Crowley. They made a big deal about the god Pan, which is kind of synonymous with, I think, even in some ways Cernunnos, which is where I think Cern comes from, the whole horn god of nature. But these connections are pretty strong. As far as the Elon Musk Kanye thing, this is interesting because Starman was sent into space through a rocket, which is another representation of the obelisk, which is the One World Tower. But the Kanye and Musk thing also, they've been hanging out during the Donde 2 event. Musk was there with him, and Musk was wearing a shirt that said crypto on it, which I thought was kind of fascinating. All these characters, that's
interesting. He's been called the Pied Piper for pushing crypto scams on kids.
Exactly. Okay, now the Pied Piper thing, that's another area here, because we're talking about fashion and hypnotizing. I said the collective hypnosis of humanity, and look what they did in 2020 with fashion control. And we're talking about fashion, but we're talking about conformity and how they do it, and they do it with these Pied Pipers. And what are we being Pied Piper to? But in my view, the One World Tower represents a global state. Like, I think that's kind of the end game, destroying national sovereignty, one big world. And I think that's what the tower represents. And that's why I think it's significant that it would represent or look like a needle. The needle itself as just a representation, I think, of the collective salvation. Everybody's on the same sheet. We all take the same. It's like for all intents and purposes, it's the program to save the world. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here with this. I mean, what's your take on the tower's significant resemblance to the needle?
Well, what really got me is watching this clip from Fox News. And they start the clip out, and I think it's all storyboarded out, all scripted out. And it starts with, like, follow us on Twitter. And it has, like, the news anchor's Twitter account. And it has this blue logo, which I think is representative of Pied Piper, which is a Pan reference if people don't know. And, of course, the pipe comes from the word for bird. So it's interesting that Musk just bought Twitter. But what were we talking about? The story with the syringe. So
yeah, the
Fox
syringe.
News, it was over the top. It was so contrived how Fox News was talking about basically this Pan ritual with this big syringe, with the music basically that it was putting off, the two-tone whistle that they kept calling like mysterious and haunting, and all these words. And I don't know how they faked it, or if that's an actual whistle they put up there.
I found what you're looking at. New York City residents reported hearing spooking, chilly chorus of pipes. This is here it is. Strange, highly pitched, ghostly sounds from the One World Trade Tower. Daily Mail. What is
over the top?
Yeah, and this is right when it was
over the top.
What is this?
Yeah, no, it's very important. I've been I have all around me right now a bunch of books about Pan because I've been trying to solve this puzzle, and this is a big part of his story. Well, once he gets his pan pipes, which he's always pictured in,
And
or pictured with in the paintings.
in the etymology of pan, it says here, the Greek word panikos, from the name Pan, noted for causing terror, for whom woodland noises were attributed. Now that's kind of interesting. Like the
Very much so. I think panic is a big, strategy of theirs. They whip people into panics.
Right, right. That's absolutely the case. And when they first declared the pandemic, I remember, and I pointed this out at the time, there were tons of headlines that said pandemonium at the airports. Like they used the word pandemonium before it even went into pandemic. And this was also consistent with it's in the early spring. And I was finding some interesting connections between the spring rites and the green, and of course, pan, all kind of coming up at once. And of course, we're talking about fertility rites coinciding with, of course, spring break. No coincidences there, but they did emphasize the word panic very strongly through pandemic. And then you brought up "Don't Panic." That's with Musk's
Right.
trip, and that again very interesting. That another connection. But please go on, because this is
And remember, in Starman, I said this earlier, but I just want to reemphasize. In the dashboard, you've mentioned this. You're probably the reason I know this. It says "Don't Panic," which you brought up as a reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But it's also, straight up a Pan reference. And then Starman is an anagram of Mr. Satan. I thought that clip you just played is really important, what Musk brings up there. And yeah, no, I just think the story of the Piper is super interesting in Pan. And he's also associated, the god, the so-called god Pan is associated with wind. And he famously is said to have died, which is interesting. And they confirmed it because the wind had stopped. And I just look at all these people with the muzzles on, and I think about, playing the pipes, they wouldn't be able to. And there's also this part of the Pan story that says all the shepherds, because the shepherds had the Pan pipes, wouldn't play the pipes at noon because that's when Pan was taking his nap. So I'm just thinking, are these people all just doing this symbology of, stopping their wind? And yeah.
There has to be. I mean, the whole "I can't breathe" thing was part of the zeitgeist, and it was beyond just George Floyd. It was also the weather, the climate change. We can't breathe because of climate change. They've correlated these things. And then, of course, the mask, the ventilation, even it seemed like the whole zeitgeist was all geared towards not being able to breathe. And that was for all of 2020. They really enforced it. And so we are talking about, of course, the airflow, and that's the main part of it. Very interesting connection here that, Jack.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, you cut out for a second.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. No, these are interesting connections here. I'm saying, the whole hymn to Pan was a big part of the Jack Parsons rocket rituals.
Right. Yes, and Apollo is connected with Pan. They had like a musical duel, and so it's interesting that Elon Musk is coming with the Pan character and displacing the Apollo characters. But I also wanted to point out, you brought up a great connection with Biden, how Hades rules over the underworld.
Yes.
I thought that was spot on. And I don't know if you saw, but they rolled out the latest variant of COVID, and they're calling it the Hounds of Hades.
No way. Okay, that's okay, because this goes into everything we've been talking about. The guy named Future, who made the masks into a fashion statement in 2017, he actually goes by Pluto. And this is the year of Pluto return, and where he's hanging out with Kanye, and Musk is in the audience there. And they're marking this as the year of the return of Pluto, and it takes us back to 1776, which is the height of that tower we're talking about. Well, right now, I'm just like, this is very interesting because Pluto, of course, is Hades. He's the one who releases the Kraken. And now we have Hounds of Hades. And, Biden, of course, the name Biden is kind of close to Bident, which is the two-pronged spear. It looks like a trident with a missing prong. That's what Hades carries. And when I first noticed these connections, I was noting that Biden was consistently being shown with his dog. And there was even a story he told, this weird story about dropping a dead dog off at the doorstep of one of his political opponents. This was last year. We were making these connections to the Hounds of Hades and the coming of Pluto and what this would represent. And now you're saying that there's an actual strain that's kind of, using that same kind of imagery. And that's just too much. Hellhound, the Hound of Hell.
Yeah, it's unreal how much scripting there is, and I'm glad you caught that with the Biden. I don't know if you've seen it, but these smallpox vaccines have these little miniature. They call them bifurcated needles, but they're basically little scale replicas of the Hades Biden, and they just stab them into the person's arm like 15 times. It kind of looks like the eye of Sauron too, especially when you dip it into the liquid, which is the first step. It has like this little gap that's filled in with the liquid that looks like the eye of Sauron.
Well, I hadn't made that connection, but yeah, you're onto something with that one. The Eye of Sauron and the little Bidens. Yeah, exactly, the little Bidens. Unbelievable. Unbelievable that they would even name
And they
it
bought
that.
hundreds of millions of doses of the so-called smallpox vaccine after 9/11, where they erected this huge syringe. So,
Wow, wow. No, these are really interesting connections, and the whole Pan and the Pied Piper thing. These are all very interesting. The Pied Piper connection to Musk, very significant. And then, speaking of this, along with Musk, here you have Kanye West buying Parler, and we're looking at another. I'm talking about the significance of them as being fashion moguls, and of course, the fashion thing, the topic. If you kind of get into it, David Bowie was pretty much Mr. Satan. He was Starman on that trip. And, he was really big on fashion. It was part of his whole character and persona. And so was Elvis, of course. We're talking about these people who are essentially Pied Pipers. But I'm just pointing out here that with the David Bowie connection, there's a lot of strong overlap between Bowie and Elvis, even having the same birthday. And one of the recent connections that I've made with this is that I think what we're seeing with a lot of these rock stars and why they all tend to use symbolism of like fallen angels particularly, and I think it comes down to they are representing perhaps even Lucifer, because if you think about it, the idea of Lucifer was or Satan, whatever, was that he wanted to be worshipped, and he was like the head of the choir, he rock star. He wanted to be worshipped, and then of course he falls down to earth for his pride. Well, what is a rock star? You're talking about like a meteor. Well, it's a light in the sky, it's a star, and then it falls, and then it's a physical rock. And I think that's symbolic of an angel, which is light, descending into the flesh, which is matter, or the black cube, the black stone. And there's a lot of symbolism, I think, that supports this in all of the movies, especially The New Man Who Fell to Earth. And I think what we're seeing with El, of course, Elvis, L-E-L is another name of this thing, this idea of, the deity descending. I think that there's some kind of story here that the public worshiping these rock stars with all these symbols, it's not for nothing that they have these big concerts laden with occult symbolism. I think they are literally idol worshiping a representative of the devil or Satan, whatever you want to call him. I mean, what do you think about that?
yeah, no, I think you're spot on, and it's really interesting that the David Bowie album cover has Kay West on it, which you called out. I wouldn't have noticed that. Well, I probably did notice it when I was a kid listening to this guy, but it's interesting that Starman is on that album, and that Elon and Kanye are friends, and then they're both in the news so much recently. And I have my big prediction right now is that they're going to hit everybody, blindside people, strike to panic with the so-called Pi variant. And I know it sounds crazy, but I just want to get on the record. All signs point to it, in my opinion. And I just see them really just screwing everybody over and pushing this forward. And I think this has been a long time in the making. So I just see them playing this all out. And I think a lot of people are going to. Go ahead.
Well, like I'm not like into making bad predictions. Like I'm not a doomer. I always say like more often than not everything is Psywar. However, you say this thing is like a long time in the making, and the more I research it, the more it starts to look to me like 1776 is a key to this on the back of the dollar bill. I think America may be a representative of the Tower of Babel, challenging the authority of God that has to be brought down. And I found a lot of stuff that supports this in the big story. And that one World Trade Tower being 1776 feet high, that's a reference, I believe, to the Tower of Babel. And I found some material suggesting that the construction for the tower started in 1776 AL, if you go back in the Masonic Year of Light. And they compute this they have the year of the flood, the year Noah died, and then the year the tower started. But anyway, I think it's very significant, of course. The One World Tower looks like a big needle. And I do think that 1776 reoccurring in 2022, the return of Pluto, I think this is the year they release the Kraken. And we're coming up towards the end of the year, whatever the Kraken's going to be. And I figured it would be great political schism, but I can't stop finding connections that keep pointing to Putin and the nuke thing as somehow setting this off.
Yeah, and the reason I bring it up is because I wanted to ask about your current state of opinion on the ISS getting shot down, because that's coming up in my analysis. I expect it to be soon, but I don't know.
Well, just last week, China had some part of their rocket blew up into 50 pieces, and coincidentally, most of the debris is in the field where the Starlink satellites would be, and the rest of it is above the ISS, and they're claiming it was an accident. And it looks to me like they're setting the stage for an accident on purpose, like let it happen on purpose, a lie hop. I think they're setting the stage where it won't be obvious like China shoots it down, but it'll be more like 9/11. Did China do it? Did George Bush do it? Did Israel do it? They'll come up with stories, but I think the next 9/11 will be some kind of space war situation. And I'm seeing a lot of predictive programming for nuclear winter. It's just insane. And then, of course, today or yesterday, Russia actually launches a fake nuke. Admittedly, a fake nuke, a dummy.
Wow. So that's really all I wanted to say. I just want to say keep up the great work. I'm watching all your shows, and I can't wait to see what you find and
cool.
Show us.
Are you still at timtruth.com?
That's right. Yep, people can find me there.
Okay,
and I hope I'm wrong about the pi variant. That's just where my analysis leads me. But yeah, I know it's out of left field.
Excellent.
But,
well,
have a great day, man.
We all appreciate the research. Have a great day. All right, that's Tim Truth. Very interesting material about Pan and the needle, and I'm going to be doing some research on that. In fact, now would be a good time to go to ips.monster, and I'll put a link in the chat. And when you go there, join the Discord server. And if you want to jump in the voice chat, we'll be discussing this and more later. I have to do some more research on some of these points that he brought up. And I'm glad he brought up the space station because they've been preparing. And these aren't so much predictions like we're guessing, but rather we are surmising from predictive programming and obvious scripting. And this based on our previous observations where predictive programming predicts what they're going to do. It is a predictive model if you look at it as such, and you can decipher and discern what's going to happen. I had called it in advance that we would be experiencing the advent of space junk as a real phenomenon that we're seeing, and it is becoming more and more common. And more importantly, the public believes in it. They believe in space junk. Now, you can make a fake space junk video and share it, and the next thing you know, people are going to think it's real, and it won't matter. Nobody's going to correct them. There's a, quote, scientist I know who sued me for, well, he countersued me after I sued him for defamation. Anyway, this is a, quote, scientist. He worked with NOAA. He's affiliated with NASA people with his little astronomy club. The thing is, on his website, and again, he's a, quote, scientist, he posts a TikTok video of a meteor hitting the ocean. And it's like some beachgoer picks up his phone, records it, and you see a giant splash. He's like, take that, flat earthers. Space is not fake. And I'm like, wait a minute here. He doesn't know this is CGI? No, he doesn't. To him, that's scientific evidence that validates his concept of the world. And I'm like, okay, I see. I see. I mean, it's kind of sad in a way. Again, thanks, Tim Truth. Great call. TimTruth.com. I'll put a link in the description. Very interesting times. A couple of the things we've touched on. Russia sends a fake nuke to Ukraine where they have dummy trucks. Russian Vids is now They Live Truth. Just a friendly announcement there. We have a new Discord server. And this new variant that Tim Truth brought up. Didn't know about that. Hellhound variant. Yes, here we go. Hellhound is the COVID 2022 variant. This is experts predict an Omicron-linked variant. Now, Omicron happens to be a planet where reptilians came from in, was it Futurama? And interestingly enough, around the time that the Omicron thing was going around, they came from a planet called, I think it was called, I want to get the name of this fictional planet right, but it was Futurama's Omicron episode. It's called Percy 8, a planet inhabited by large aliens that frequently attempt to invade the Earth. Now, here's what's interesting about this. At the time that the Omicron variant was going out, there was a piece of Russian space junk that was threatening all of us. A big hunk of a failed Russian rocket crashes to the Earth as space junk. This was in January. It was called the Percy. Now, what I pointed out here is that at the time that the Percy upper stage of the Russian rocket was falling down, we had the Omicron variant. And again, the Omicron variant has a tie-in to Futurama and where the aliens come from. Just another one of these interesting connections, the idea that you could draw the line, connect the dots here, that the virus is an alien invasion, in the subtext, which is the exact story that we saw in the movie Sputnik, the 2020 film that came out the same day that Putin came out with the Sputnik 5 vaccine. And now this movie is a horror movie. You can see a cosmonaut covered in blood here. But this is interesting because it talks about the Cold War, and I think this is all funny world stage kind of word plays. Like again, Bernie Madoff, Goldman Sachs. These are all names that tell you their function. And I think the Cold War, a term commonly used to refer to a period of geopolitical tension between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. To me, Cold War was a period of time that it took for them to convince the world that it caught a cold, and therefore we have to go communist, which is pretty much what has been happening. But this movie, of course, Cold War, 1983, 2 Russian cosmonauts are on a research mission, and they brought back extraterrestrials inside their own bodies. In other words, these aliens are like viruses. The creatures come out at night while their hosts are asleep. Now here's where it gets kind of Pizzagate, or whatever. How you had all these rumors in 2020 at the time that the elites were drinking blood and they preferred to terrorize their victims. Well, this is where the story gets kind of interesting. The cosmonaut is there to determine how to separate the patient from the creature, the alien, because they're in a symbiotic relationship and it lives in the guy's esophagus. Now, it turns out that when the creature emerges, it goes to feed on a prisoner. And one of the storylines here is that the governments of the world had made a secret deal with the aliens. The aliens aren't going to take over and kill us all as long as we feed them prisoners. Now here's what they do. She discovers the creatures are affected by hormone levels. And the horrifying truth, the creature doesn't feed on what their host eats, but it eats live humans. And it's been fed prisoners. The creature reveals itself to its victims to augment their fear, which makes the human brain release cortisol, from which the alien obtains its nutrition. They feed on fear. The alien parasite feeds on fear. I think this is an interesting topic overall, but to correlate this with everything else, we talked about this whole Pizzagate, adrenochrome stuff, and I came to the conclusion that no, they're not going to go to every person and extract anything physically. There's something else they're getting, and somehow they're extracting it. Like there's some kind of mass loosh extraction network inherent within the whole PSYOP entertainment complex. Somehow there is some kind of parasitic relationship. At least it would seem that way. There is a hive mind quality to it. And that's why I like referring back to 2020, just to show how we haven't evolved much. Collectively, we're still, the humanity is hypnotized and spellbound. Mail Online News, 400 private jets arrive in Europe during COP27. 400 private jets. Now remember, it was just a couple months ago that an environmentalist set himself on fire, and on his shirt it said, "Ban private jets UK. Stop oil." Yeah, these stop oil guys are against private jets, and here their saviors are using private jets. Lean Dion says Bowie has an old video game, Omicron. Now, yeah, Omicron. Omicron is a video game about human beings being taken over by alien parasites. I think it's kind of a similar theme. Let's go up. David Bowie, Omicron game. Here we go. The Nomad Soul is an adventure game developed by Quantum Dream. Omicron, the Nomad Soul. I watched a video about it. It was probably too far ahead of its time as far as what they could actually do as far as computing power with the gaming consoles of the time. But it did have quite a bit here about possession, I think is the main word here. Here we go. It says here, the awakened. This is the thing. The anti-government movement is revealed to be named the Awakened, who invite the player to join them. The Awakened refer to the protagonist as the Nomad Soul, as they have the ability to change bodies at will. They learn that what is going on is an extension of an old battle between mankind and demons. Anyway, it just goes on about the intricacies of this game, but the name Omicron stands out here. The David Bowie Elvis connections are fascinating, and the David Bowie Kanye connections that Tim Truth brought up are fascinating. But what I want to mention here is that the connection between Bowie and Kanye is something that's been pointed out. It's been pointed out by RollingStone.com. Like, here's one from 2017. Kanye and Bowie, music's most WTF conspiracy theory. Here we go. Did David Bowie predict the rise of Kanye West? Here's how David Bowie predicted the rise of Kanye West. Is Kanye West the Starman? Now, this is where it pulls it all together. Rolling Stones tweeted, is Kanye West Starman? Now, Starman is the man who fell to Earth. Now, I have a few connections here. This is from RollingStone.com. Is Kanye West the Starman David Bowie prophesied inside music's most WTF conspiracy theory? Such a great topic here. It's pretty rich because you may not associate Bowie with Elvis or Kanye with Elvis, but when you start seeing the lines here, you'll see that there's like more or less a role, or I would say a role, that somebody has to epitomize this certain entity. It's an icon thing. And it's not a coincidence that David Bowie and Elvis have the same birthday, January 8th. And moreover, that Bowie releases Black Star on Elvis's birthday. The Black Star is a reference to the Starman. And here's the synopsis. 1972, David Bowie album has predictions of a Kanye West that would be born in 5 years. That would be called Starman. Well, 5 years later, Kanye's born. Now, the same year that Kanye was born, the actor who, I think his name is Chiwetel, he's the one who plays the man who fell to Earth in the new version of what was originally a film with Bowie. And the connection here is just intriguing because I think you can point to a few things to say that, yes, there is a story conveyed through David Bowie's music. It ties in to the space age. The whole space oddity and space odyssey connection is very important here. We're talking about the dramatization of man becoming a space-faring species that we're, and then of course the Starman is all predictive programming for some kind of savior from space, an alien savior, whatever it happens to be. But the story of a man who fell to Earth and then of course is worshipped by everybody, this rock star thing. This is an archetype that connects all these characters. Interestingly, and I'll pull up an article on this, during the new Elvis movie, the director insisted that they play the Kanye West song Black Skinhead before every single scene. Elvis director played Kanye West Black Skinhead to hype the actors. Like, does that even make any sense to anybody here? What would be the point of that? Well, if you've been paying attention to Kanye in the last couple of weeks or months, you'll know why the black skinhead has very specific relevance. White lives matter, and here he is saying all of the platitudes that the skinheads would actually say, a lot of their same tropes. That's why he's being raked over the coals. He is playing out this role. But my point being, of course, is he the star man prophesied by Bowie? Absolutely. And what does it all mean? Well, it means, if you ask me, the whole Starman thing, I don't know if this is the end or whatever, but it just means that I think they constantly need to have us worshiping some idol who then falls from grace. And I figured they were going to have him, I don't know, kill or maybe somehow go full Charlie Manson on the Pete Davidson thing. But I predicted back in January, based on a lot of things, that we were going to see this fall of Kanye West's world coinciding with the fall of the West. It's all very intricate, but I'm just pointing out that the Kanye West conspiracy, this connection with Bowie, has been pointed out by Rolling Stone. And moreover, oh look, it's no longer up on their page. 404. Kanye and Bowie music's most WTF conspiracy theory explained. I put out a few articles on it, but what I can say for sure, like, I'm not saying these guys are actually, demigods, or they're actually somehow imbued with any kind of mystic power. I'm just saying that these individuals are playing out certain archetypal roles. David A. Pryor says Bowie ties to Kubrick and David Lynch too. Probably the second biggest esoteric filmmakers ever. Right. Oh, these connections are always intriguing. One of the most interesting things to me has been this kind of shadowy role of Marilyn Manson in this whole picture with Kanye. Because, of course, you have Kanye West hanging out with Marilyn Manson, doing a song together called Jail. But previously they had already been featured together because the song Black Skinhead has Marilyn Manson samples in it from The Beautiful People. Now, the connection here, though, is Marilyn Manson is a direct reference to Charles Manson. Charles Manson is the one who said that we would be having this end of the world race war that would be called Helter Skelter, black versus white. Moreover, the Manson killings were ordered, and they were set up to be blamed on, by Manson, the Black Panthers. Manson sends his killers to kill these Hollywood celebrities in an atrocious, shocking way, and of course, blaming the Black Panthers to incite a counter response. Probably not a coincidence that Kanye West is the son of a Black Panther. Now, the Black Panthers today are it's BLM, but you can see the connection here. And by the way, the whole Black Panther thing is very intriguing because what they've done is they've used this Marvel character to put a certain meme out there that that integrates the youth, and the larger immersive illusion we're in is just saturated. Everywhere I go, I see the Black Panther character, Wakanda, Black Panther. It's meant to tie in, if you ask me, to the political group BLM. It's meant to tie all these things together. They're inseparable. You can't separate Black Panther from Mr. 42, Jackie, who played the movie Mr. 42, played by or starring Chadwick Boseman, who played Jackie Robinson. These are very politicized roles, and Chadwick Boseman played Black Panther. He died in 2020. Of course, that was he was ritually mourned by children burying their Black Panther toys in the backyard. My point being, they correlated this Black Panther character with MLK on the same day. Meanwhile, BLM was marching and peacefully protesting. This is all just, again, a layered mind war. And they reach every demographic with the key pertinent symbols. T-Dog135 says, watch Black Panther Part 1 today. I'm going to have to watch it now. They do the arms crossed over the chest, and that's Osiris risen. And of course, on the day that Chadwick Boseman died, it's all Rip King, the hashtag Rip King, because he's the king of Wakanda. But it was also Rip King because Martin Luther King was being commemorated on the 57th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech. I mean, think about the coincidences there. Rip King, Black Panther, you have MLK, and then of course they're over at the obelisk, praying to MLK. The obelisk being a symbol of, Osiris, and then of course these things are rituals that are being actually played out by children. It's kind of fascinating to watch just how deep this Psy-War actually goes. Sometimes they admit it. Disney admitted that Elsa's basically Greta. Okay, let us continue here. This is Bitter Truth Zerky on Twitter. It's the ones closest to heart that they use to block your exit from this staged nightmare we all live in. Once you can get over your love of the character you hold closest, you realize they're nothing more than just a character in the wicked play we watch. This is a reference to The Truman Show. And this is this movie is a really important film. Not just for the esoterica, the falling star, the dog star, but also it shows you how gatekeeping works and how they shrunk his world. How his world was very small and tiny, and it was kept that way with lies. And how he had to overcome these lies, and a lot of it was recognizing that everybody around him were involved in some level in this big deception. Another movie that I don't know if I recommend it. I mean, I watch movies very analytically. If they're bad, I still watch them. This one's called Room. And this movie, I think it's based on something of a true story, but it's about a captive mother and child. He doesn't know he's a captive. He was born into captivity because his mother was kidnapped, held for 5 years in essentially a shed. Now, as he's approaching 5 years of age, she starts preparing him to escape, and she says, "We're going to go to the world out there." And he's like on the TV, because he only knows the world from the television. He doesn't believe there's anything beyond the wall, and he yells at her angrily when she tries to say that there is. He calls her a liar, and she says, "No, I'm unlying to you now. I lied to you for the first 5 years to protect you." But again, the movie was about how his mind, it was just basically the size of the cage that it was put in. And I think this is very similar in many ways to The Truman Show and the whole idea of gatekeeping. And of course, by gatekeeping, I mean people who are there to prevent you from wandering too far. And that's exactly what The Truman Show is actually about. And of course, the true man is a false man until he recognizes how fake the world is. And yeah, it's also notable again that the whole movie depicts how his awakening begins when a stage light falls, and it's got Canis Majoris, Sirius the dog star on it. And the dog star is especially significant in all of the secret societies. It's the central star of worship. You look at the pentagram, it's pretty much Sirius. But that was the star that triggered his awakening. And one of the reasons why that's significant to me is, like, I was studying this and I noticed it in this Jim Carrey film. And then I watch a few other Jim Carrey films, and I'm noticing that a lot of these actors will involve themselves with this, they'll be involved with the same archetypes, the same symbols, movie after movie. And I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of like there's a continuity here that transcends any one script, but it connects them all. And there are many actors I pointed out that seem to carry an archetypal role across all of their films. And, Jim Carrey is certainly one of them. Same with the numbers. And if you're looking at the screen, you're looking at a time lapse of the Earth from space as presented from NASA. Now, you can believe it if you want. You can believe that's an actual camera and that it's doing a time lapse. As a video editor, I've worked with 3D animation. I can't separate that from this. Like I've said earlier, digital forensics would debunk everything that they're showing us from above. But I want you to look at that continent there if you're watching. And it's easy to find if you're not watching. Just search for Earth at night from space or from the ISS. The dark side of the Earth looks like a Christmas tree. The night side of the ball is lit. You can see every car, you can see every road, every city. I mean, it's glowing. But on the most recent image that they showed us of Earth from space, on this recent mission here, the dark side of the Earth is black. Like there's nothing there. And I'm just saying that should not be. I think unless they all turn their lights off. I mean, did that happen? Okay, let us continue. Going through my Twitter feed at Real Tim Osman. Quite a lot of interesting channels that I'm following. I don't want to lend any credence to the people who say that gorillas aren't real, but I did find a really good video on my Twitter feed which shows you how fakeable gorillas are. And look, they're fakeable. And what we see here is an animatronic costume. As in what you're seeing in this little video is an animatronic gorilla, but it has a human operator. And the human is down on all fours, and then his hands clutch these handles, and then the fists of the gorilla extend another foot beyond that. And it shows you how fakeable it is. That, yeah, you could definitely, this guy here looks like a gorilla. And here he is with the skull face. They haven't put the hood on yet. Now, all I'm saying is gorillas are fakeable. Anything's fakeable for the most part. But the question is, are gorillas fake? Categorically, no. Obviously not. It's important not to jump to conclusions that just because something's fakeable, it's therefore fake. Like the whole birds aren't real nonsense. Obviously, that's not true. Nobody believes that. In fact, the birds aren't real movement was started by some off-duty crisis actors. A bunch of people from Parkland. They started doing this birds aren't real movement to make it look like people who question the news are crazy. Oh, you don't believe in school shootings? You must believe that birds are fake. But there are a lot of people who go on TikTok and say gorillas are fake. The most you can say is that they are fakeable, but I would maintain they're not fakeable at scale. They're not at the scale of zoos. I mean, just the infrastructure for maintaining the costume department, the people involved, it would make zero sense. There's no reason to even arrive at that conclusion. But yes, you can say yes, it's possible that you could fake a gorilla, but categorically, no, they're not fake. Okay, we already heard from Dr. Klaus Schwab about how the world's not going to look the same. Yeah, sure. I don't know what's worse though, the Great Reset or the Great Awakening. Who do you want in charge? Klaus Schwab or JFK worshippers? And by the way, it's the 18th. JFK could be showing up on the 22nd in Dallas. And can someone answer this for me? I mean, this is just one of these questions that somebody has to have the answer to it. But like, it's a serious question. If last year hundreds of QAnoners were gathered in Dealey Plaza because they were convinced that JFK was showing up, like if that was the case last year and he didn't show up, what would make them think he's not showing up this year? I mean, why would they say yes last year and no this year? What has actually changed? Did he die? Do they no longer believe he was alive? Like, I don't think it would be logically consistent for the QAnoners not to show up in Dealey Plaza in a few days. And if they don't, then you know that they're completely Pied Pipered and paid. That it's not organic, it's not real, and possibly nobody believes it. Does anybody here want to believe it? Is it even something that's even all that desirable? Like, yeah, I really hope it's true that the Democrats are a bunch of Satanists and a bunch of kids are being tortured right now. I hope it's true so that Trump can save them, the ones that are still alive, because this mission started years ago. But we hope it's true so he can eventually be vindicated. Like, I don't know. I'd rather not live in that world. I don't believe that's the case. I don't think it's true. But, it's kind of like you can understand why people would find certain things believable. The Revelator.org, election denial is the new climate denial and is still a threat. Okay. Says here, quote, the midterms may have avoided a red wave, but there's still blood and anti-science conspiracy theorists in the water. They're comparing you to sharks. Disaster trolls is the new term. Oh yeah, if you want to fact check a disaster, you're a disaster troll, according to the BBC. Now, just in case it is going to happen, I did share a link here from Eventbrite. In other words, I kind of organized it, but we'll see if it happens or if it actually does happen. Awaiting JFK's return to Dealey Plaza for the 59th anniversary, 11/22/2022 at 11 a.m. I put a notice out on Eventbrite. I tried to get some ads, but they refused my ads for some weird reason. But I put it out there, and I'm sharing this on Facebook, and I'm wondering, will they actually gather? So far, 3 people have signed on, but they could have been people from my own server. But we'll see. If they don't, they're a bunch of hypocrites. If they don't show up for JFK this time, and he shows up, how is he going to feel? Imagine he shows up 59 years after his assassination for his big reveal, and his fan base have moved on to Kerry Lake. And JFK Jr., yeah, he's probably depressed because now people are talking about MTG, Kerry Lake, and shiny new object syndrome. Like I said, with the hopium addicts, it's a current thing. It's like whatever's going to give them hope for the next. It's the next misleader. They're constantly just throwing away one for the next one. Like they were like their whole lives they were Christians. I'm like, oh, sorry, Jesus. Trump's here. All right, let's see here. Jewish cemetery vandalized with swastikas, the Jerusalem Post. 16 headstones were painted with swastikas. Kanye was right. They spelled right, R-I-T-E. The swastikas are probably backward. And look, just for the record, 66% of hate crimes are proven to be hoaxes later. The rest are probably ones that haven't been investigated, the ones they got away with. Like, I'm willing to bet that I'm not saying a rabbi, but possibly has red paint on his hands. Like, do you remember when those churches were burning after Dylan Roof shot up that church in Charleston? They're like 5 churches burned. It's the KKK. They're burning down churches. No, it was the pastor that burned down one. Another church said, vote for Trump, spray painted on the side. Well, it was a pastor that did that. Like, these are self-inflicted wounds. I don't think any of the neo-Nazis out there today are actually going around spray painting cemeteries. It's kind of ironic that they would line up behind Kanye as well. Because, I mean, they don't just hate one ethnic group. I mean, they hate everybody. I mean, that's what we're actually supposed to believe anyway. Chinese official squirms at questions about rocket that disintegrated in orbit. This is the article I referenced to Tim Truth about the space station and the storyline supporting its eventual decommissioning. They're kind of acting squirmy about it. And I think this is so they have plausible deniability. I don't think we're going to get some deliberate in-your-face attack. I think it's more like, uh-oh, it hit some space junk. Now it's going down. Whose fault is it? Space junk is a problem. It's America's fault. No, China did it. They let it happen on purpose. Bush did it. Bush did the space 9/11. They'll find a way. They'll blame it on Trump. China's attracted growing criticism for space debris, which it lets crash down to Earth chaotically following major launches. First announced by the U.S. Space Force on Twitter, the breakup resulted in dozens of new pieces in orbit. By the way, Space Force has taken control of all military satellites, which to me sounds like, if anything, it's a build-up to space war. U.S. Space Force operated defense support program satellites are a key part of North America's early warning system. Army transfers satellite communications to the U.S. Space Force. They had a ceremony in August. Space Force takes over all military satellite communications. Major step, Space Force takes over all military satellite. If space is fake, then what does this say about the military? Like, serious question here. If you don't believe outer space is what they say it is, or what they've presented, if you don't think we live on a big CGI ball, if the department that fakes that, for the space war scenario, if they're in control of all military satellites, what does it say about everything else? I mean, the question answers itself. They're openly admitting that they're shooting dummy rockets at decoys. I mean, dummy rockets at decoys. Salty Siren says, how about they're the reality denialists? Yeah, I would say so. I mean, what we're looking at here is this. There are facts and there are narratives. And if their narrative, if their belief in a false explanation prevents them from looking at facts, then they are, in all fact, in denial of those facts. I would say they are reality denialists. You don't have to be a reality denialist to say you don't believe in their CGI ball. You just have to say you don't believe their evidence. You want more. But to to actually say, I mean, reality denialism is like so pervasive at this point, though. We're just so augmented. Like this whole idea of the metaverse. You have to be put on a headset, and then you're in this simulation, and you're seeing other simulations, other avatars. I think that's kind of a misdirection, because if anything, our reality is already so augmented with stuff like, climate change, radical Islamic terrorists in these cells everywhere, bowl cut shooters. You can go down a litany of all the things that don't exist, like the guys that lynched Jussie Smollett, or the officers that are swatting Gavin McInnes. Like, you can find so many examples of fakery inserted into our world. Like, how are we not already in a metaverse? I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's an augmented virtual reality. And I don't deny anything like it comes to climate change. I'm not a denialist. I'm just saying that you can only take their narrative so far if they don't have any facts behind them. I trust the facts. Like, I believe that they do launch something. Do I believe it's actually going into this place called space? No, I think there's a definite point where it cuts. Like, you'll notice every single rocket follows the same exact trajectory, and once it's out of sight, out of mind, probably headed towards the Bermuda Triangle, they just cut. It's a jump cut. Now suddenly you're in space, looking from the rocket's point of view, looking down. That's called sleight of mind. Not Shocked says, space farce. Well, moon landing denialism. Like, is that what you would call it? Because, to me, denialism comes from those who aren't willing to examine the photographic evidence of hoaxery. Digital forensics. You're a reality denialist if you're not willing to look at the ISS, at AVR glitches, at green screen glitches, at harnesses, at wires, at cross-fading astronauts. I mean, imagine if you're looking at your friend or spouse or your dog, and it's walking out of the room. And as it turns the corner, it becomes transparent, and then it disappears. That happens with astronauts all the time. There's a video of this astronaut playing with a soccer ball, and he jumps, and his head goes into the ceiling. I've seen one where a microphone goes through somebody's neck. We've seen necklaces that aren't even there. Like, they add necklaces on the video in post-production. Like on TikTok. On TikTok, you can find filters that make it look like you've got something on your head or something on your face. Well, the astronauts have been doing this stuff for years. Before everyone else had their hands on it, they would do it. More often, like, for example, there was this one scene, and I use the word scene advisedly because this is just a 22-year reality TV show. There's a scene on the ISS where the astronauts are talking to the Pope. And one of the astronauts has a cross around his neck, like a crucifix, and like a snake, it worms out of his shirt and it starts floating around randomly. I'm like, yeah, okay. And he's not reacting like it's there. Like, if you feel a crucifix bouncing around on your face, you would react to it. Maybe you'd pat it down. Nope, he didn't even know it was there. Robert Bell says washing money in space. Oh, it's like what, $58 million, $58 billion a day? What do they give him now? They're getting that Sandy Hook money. NASA's getting, let me see how much it's getting per day. NASA per day. Now here's the thing, as far as their budget. The amount of money that they get per day is probably more than Apollo 11 had. And the technology, of course, has been advanced over the last few decades, but they haven't been able to repeat the Apollo 11, which kind of makes me think that what they ought to do is have a breakaway, like have another group, like a vintage, a throwback, maybe a retro NASA ensemble. Give them a smaller budget, give them 1960s technology, and see if they can beat 2022 NASA to the moon. And I think they'll be able to. But sure, they're definitely washing money in space. I'm almost certain, though, that deep space is beneath our feet. I think all that money has been going into the development of underground architecture, infrastructure. Angst G said, could these mistakes be made on purpose? I always hear that. I hear a lot of people saying, they're so bad, it's got to be on purpose. Like, are they trying to give us hints? It's a little wink to the truther. No, it's not on purpose. They lie about these things, they hide these things. They're actually that bad. There's a few reasons why they are so bad. Even the best movies in the world, best directors have continuity errors and flaws. We're talking about simulating. It's not always perfect. You always have errors. But what's more, if you're talking about Hollywood, you get a draw from the best in every field, best artists, best art director, actors. You have a better pool to draw from, a labor pool, that is. With NASA, who are you going to hire to do your space fakery? Well, scum, liars, government workers, people whose qualifications for artistry on that level may not actually come from anything other than their ability to participate in a hoax. Like, yeah, if you're willing to play along, and that's why your first lunar lander was like literally shower rods, shower curtain rods and aluminum foil and scotch tape and construction paper. The gags. People say, why are crisis actors so bad? It's like, well, they couldn't make it into the Screen Actors Guild. They're not Hollywood. They're government actors. The Government Actors Guild, the gags. Terrible actors. And I'm just saying that the astronauts are also government actors. They're not going to be as good as private sector. That's why there's no comparison in the space travel in the ISS and what we see in the movies and the video games. There's no comparison. Diana Southard says, like CGI Joe shaking hands with the air. His CGI assistant wasn't on his stage mark. Precisely. Exactly that. You can find examples of astronauts handing objects to other astronauts, and they'll put it on the shelf when they haven't actually grabbed it from the person. Like, has someone ever handed you something and you put it on a shelf only to realize that you didn't actually grab it? Probably not. But it happens in space with regularity. Returning to the moon with Artemis generation. A couple notes here on Artemis. Artemis is the twin of Apollo. Apollo mission Artemis. The twin thing is kind of interesting. Another thing, of course, we have Artemis is another moon goddess, like Diana, moon goddess. You have that sun, moon kind of alchemy thing. And, okay, Apollo was what? It was the Apollo sun god going to the moon, Diana. Sun and moon. What you have with the sun and the moon merging in alchemical terms, it's the two becoming one. We're talking about like when you have the eclipse, the sun and the moon combining. This is a very common theme in alchemy in their symbolic system. And it seems to be the case that 2001 A Space Odyssey is actually about our journey into the space age, and it contains this idea. The 2001, the 2, and then the 00. That's the sun and the moon. 2 becoming 1. And, of course, when you look at the ground zero at 9/11, and this is all very much connected to Kubrick because 2001 is when, of course, 9/11 happens. The Twin Towers were taken down, and now we have the one. But the whole eclipse thing was very significant with the 2020 and the corona, because with the corona is what you call the rays of the sun around the eclipse. You got the crown. Very repetitive in their symbolism here. They send the man to the moon. Yeah, it's actually alchemical. It's about the god and the goddess becoming one, two into one, sun and moon into one. And they're just repeating it. It's actually a fertility rite for all intents and purposes. Tim and Vic says Event 201. Yes, same thing. Event 201, 2 into 1, Corona. It's about alchemy, it's about transformation. And of course, we mentioned David Bowie and Starman. Well, in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, there's a few elements there worth pointing out. One, Hell 9000, your AI god, your Gaia, this higher mind. And of course, it has the single eye, which is very significant. And then the character is actually named David Bowman. Now, David Bowman merges with the monolith and becomes the Star Child, meaning the child of the New Age. And I think David Bowie, of course, is a reference to David Bowman. It's a stage name. And I think the reference here, of course, with Starman and the David Bowie effigy being sent into space, it's all connected. It's all connected to this idea of two becoming one. And I think one of the meanings, and it has to do with 9/11, it's when the world and the mirror, which is the movie world, became one. I think that 9/11 is when the entire world was synchronized enough for them, the controllers of media, the world state de facto church. It was when they were able to synchronize everyone and merge us with the monolith, like David Bowman. The monolith being the TV screen, the movie screen, now your smartphone. But that's what it represents. Merging with it means you have accepted the premise that what is being televised is real to the point that you live in a augmented reality. You've gone through the screen, like Alice in Wonderland through the looking glass. You've gone through the screen, 2 into 1, meaning the movie world and the real world have become one. And this is increasingly evident every time I note all these crisis actors at these events suddenly becoming real-life activists with blue checks on Twitter. Yeah, they've come out of the screen. They've made them real. The existence of psyops and hoaxes and perception management is critical to understanding the bigger picture, in my view, because it was all about subverting the masses' minds, which is what they've done. They really have. They have put people into it's not like the world's fake. It's just that their concepts of certain things are fake, and they've accepted certain explanations. And that's where the controls come in, like Truman in the Truman Show. Yeah, he could just walk off at any time, but the system of lies kept him from venturing and even questioning whether or not there was even anywhere else to go, because he was fully immersed in what? An actor-driven reality. Everyone around him was part of the script, part of the story, part of the program. You could say that Truman was already in the TV. He was a star of his own TV show. That was the whole point. Well, I'm saying that we are all in our own kind of Truman. So this is the world stage is a Truman Show. And of course, if you start to see through it, you get labeled a conspiracy theorist. A couple of other things about the Twin Towers. Just we were going through symbolism from Back to the Future, which has a lot of references to 9/11, and it references them specifically with the Twin Pines Mall. And I think Twin Pines, of course, could easily reference twin spines. And what I mean by this is the human spine, the vertebrae, 33 segments, very significant in all of the symbolism. Of course, the age of Christ. You know, I think the Pope has 33 segments or 33 buttons on his cassock to symbolize the years of Christ, but actually it's the spine. Twin spines, because the idea here in alchemy, and when I say alchemy, I'm talking about the symbolism of Kubrick but also the occult practices and what they term alchemy, and specifically the great rite, that is the union of the god and the goddess, the sun and the moon. Well, if you think about it, in these rituals, the priest is the god, the priestess is the goddess. He's the sun, she's the moon. Now, each of them have 33 segments in their spine, twin spines. When they merge, the two become one. That's the chemical wedding. That's the great rite, and that's the point where the sun and the moon conjoin. And what does that mean? The idea is that they call it the fire snake, the kundalini. Their spines, the spinal column, is the seat of consciousness, not just the brain, and that the entire spine is lit when the two are together. And what that means is, of course, the corona symbol represents the 33 vertebrae lit. And of course, the top of the 33 is the crown chakra. Crown is corona. We're talking about the idea of course, the twin towers burning down, but the twin spines, twin pines, and of course, how old are the twin towers? 1968, construction begins. They are pulled down in 2001. They're 33-year-old towers. And of course, they brought back the new one, like I said earlier, 13 years later. You know, all this stuff is very deeply encoded. You cannot separate many world stage characters from these big events either, which tells you how scripted it all is. You know, specifically Trump. You know, Trump is encoded deeply in Back to the Future. Much of the predictive programming that predicts Trump has to do with time travel, but he's quite literally Biff Tannen. Biff Tannen, President Biff Tannen. Not Shocked says hell is IBM, just add one letter to each. Yes, Hell 9000. There's actually a Hell 9000-like character in Pixar as well, in the Pixar film Wall-E. His name is Otto. They put the world on autopilot. Think about this. In Pixar, they live in an ark. Another reoccurring theme that we keep seeing. A space ark, because the world is covered in space junk and trash. And while they are up there orbiting, they've given over control to Otto. We went on to autopilot. But this is where it ties into the real world. Like, this is totally predictive programming. Before the world was abandoned because of pollution and climate change, the president in this Pixar film Wall-E, he gets on the screen on the TV and he says, Directive 113. Directive 113 means put it all on autopilot, abandon ship. In other words, 113 is 311 backward, obviously, and 311 is the date the pandemic started. Directive 113 means put it on auto, abandon ship, going into the arcs. And the point of this is, Otto is Gaia, this thing they're introducing, this AI god, Hell 9000. In the movie Pixar film Wall-E, they were definitely saying, once we declare Directive 113, we're going into auto. We're going into, well, whatever this AI thing happens to be, the turning over controls. And, you know, here's something else, too. Speaking of Bowie, 1969, the song Savior Machine, you know, David Bowie, has a reference to a President Joe who hands over control of the world to a savior machine that solves hunger. Here's the lyrics. David Bowie, Savior Machine. President Joe once had a dream. The world held his hand, gave their pledge. So he told them his scheme for a savior machine. Its logic stopped war and gave them food. They called it the prayer. Its answer was law. But it goes on about this machine brought about by President Joe. I'm like, that's weird. And of course, another reason why this is significant is that the year, of course, it came out. It was like 1969. And then last year, President Joe was out there at that NATO digital monolith thing. Anyway, predictive programming for President Joe Biden? I think so. Lean Dion says Wall-E was the first name given meaning after multiple uses of 113 in Pixar. Yes, and 113, of course, we talked about the significance of that number, but it's used all over Pixar films. And in Wall-E, they finally gave it an actual meaning. It wasn't just some mysterious number. Elon Musk has been trolled. A lot of his former employees were projecting messages on the wall of the headquarters. One of them was Space Karen. Anyway, Musk is seen by some as some kind of a hero, free speech absolutist, but he certainly censors anybody that criticizes him. And you can't forget that Musk brought you Mousegate. If you don't know what Mousegate is, it's just really one of the biggest trolls of all time. Here we are, 2019, December 5th, CRS-19 mission from SpaceX to the ISS. They're sending supplies up. Along with the supplies, they're sending genetically modified mice to the space station so they can study the effects of muscular atrophy in mice who've been bestowed with special genetically enhanced muscles. Anyway, while the rocket's on the way to the space station, there's quite obviously a CGI mouse running laps on the side of the rocket. There's no other explanation for it. It has to be CGI. Obviously, it couldn't be a real mouse. Beyond that, the scale was off. A real mouse would be much, much smaller than what we saw on the side of that rocket. But my point is, a lot of people would look at this thing and they say, no, it's not a mouse. It's got to be a video compression artifact. It's got to be a space ice. Here's a Reddit post by JLB. Is Mousegate going to blow the lid on the Elon Musk SpaceX fraud? And of course, most people just try to pretend like they don't see what they see. Now, if you're looking at the screen, this is a mouse on the exterior of a SpaceX rocket, December 5th, 2019. Now, whatever your explanation for it, the fact is, this was the very mission where SpaceX was sending Mighty Mouse. SpaceX was sending literal, look, even the headlines talked about it being Mighty Mice. Well, who is Mighty Mouse? He's a cartoon mouse that goes in space. Like, this is quite literally Mighty Mouse. All right, let's see what else we have here. 5 miles ahead says pineal gland at the top of the 33rd vertebrae. Yes, precisely. The number 33 is very consistently used in all of these psyops. Another number we often see is 42. Everything Musk does has to do with the number 42. And I think I know what they mean. We've done a lot of research on it, and my best interpretations are based on usage. And from what I've seen, the number 33 is consistently used to associate. It's associated with resurrection, ascension. They used it a lot with the whole Phoenix thing after COVID. But 33 seems to have to do with ascension or transcendence. Like you transcend the world or you descend into it. And 42 is consistently used with Saturn and a descent or a fall. And I think there's a connection here, if you think about it, because 33 is associated also with the sun in Christ. So one is rising. 42 is consistently used with Saturn, or descending and falling, or darkness, light and dark. And then I've been thinking, you have the Masonic pillars, the black and the white, and the tiles, the black and the white, and there's constantly this reference to this duality. And if you think about it, in their symbolic system, the closest luminary would be the sun. The furthest would be Saturn. And in their symbolic system, the sun brings light and life, and Saturn brings is death and darkness, rules the night. And there's this relationship between the two. If you look at like the Egyptian myth of night personified as Set, Prince of Darkness, killing the sun at sunset on the Terminator line. The Terminator, remember the Terminator movies? He comes back in time to take out JC, like Jesus Christ. The terminator is the line at sunset where the sun dies, and in the Egyptian myths, the sun god dies at sunset. That's why the terminators come in to kill the sun. It's all just mythology. But I consistently see the number 42 associated with the dark and Saturn and falling, and then the light rising in Christ is 33, and they play these numbers off each other. They use these in their rituals consistently, and you can read, like, for example, on the 42nd anniversary of the St. Vincent volcano eruption, there was another eruption, and at that time, Joe Rogan had 42 tracks pulled from Spotify. At that time, there was Trisha Paytas, I think her name is, 33 at the time, who was ripping on him for his hate speech and stuff. But anyway, the number 42 was immediately there associated with Rogan. And I said at the time, anytime you see the number 42 being used very explicitly, it means someone's going to take a fall from grace. There's going to be some kind of a hit. And here we have Spotify's deleted 42 episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience. And then shortly after, he did have to make some concessions, and he did have this drama. And then Spotify began censoring everybody. Then they found that he had used the N-word 24 times. Kaepernick's lawyer did a montage of it. My point is, he had publicly taken a bit of a fall for misinformation, for prescribing horse paste and everything else. But it started with this number. And I called it then. I said, look, he's going to take a fall on behalf of podcasters. And that has pretty much happened since. All right, let's see. This is the Agent Smith effect. This is kind of interesting. Someone pointed this out. We're talking about gatekeeping on the Truman Show. The Agent Smith effect. Agent Smith has the ability to enter any body anytime. And this often happens when the Matrix is threatened. Most people have had an Agent Smith Matrix programming in their own lives since birth. These programmed people become guardians of the Matrix, protectors of the code, the police of mind control, and the enforcers of the indoctrination, which holds together our false concept of reality like superglue. And this is very true. I think one of the most potent weapons they have in this mind war, like I've been talking about, is fashion, but more specifically peer pressure. And nothing is more effective, I think, than the threat of everybody's going to laugh at you. I think that holds people back from quite a lot. And of course, they use government jesters, aka comedians, to tell you what is and isn't funny. That way you can be in the good graces of the mob. It's really like weaponized peer pressure. We can talk about the elite, the controllers, or whatever, but the fact is, the controllers and the elite operate through billions of people following their Pied Pipers. It's really that simple. Like, who are the elite? Well, it's the mask Karen down the street. It's the enforcers of this, of all of the top-down programming. Again, if you want one of these go bags, white popcorn not included, you can go to Amazon.com. I'll put a link below, but I do have IPS tote bags with the signature unicursal penguin. And if you're not familiar with the unicursal penguin, what it represents or anything, it's just another way of representing our penguin mascot with the wrench of the moderator. In fact, I'll draw one now on my favorite drawing program. It's called sketchpad.app, and I'll show you what I mean by unicursal. And the point of it is one continuous line, no break, and they're pretty standardized. And I've been working with similar characters, but if you're looking at the screen, but what I do for this one in particular, and this is all trademark, but there's an actual infinity sign built into the face in the first eye. Then the feet actually consist of another infinity sign. And then within the wrench itself, in the handle, I always include another one. But very simple design. I have these on these bags on Amazon, Go bags, which you will need. If they shoot a dummy nuke over here and then they present some corresponding CGI on the TV, yeah, you're going to be ordered into lockdown. And if you want to be unlockdownable, go to infiniteplane.media and order yourself a press pass. If you have a press pass, you're considered to be, I think the word they use is essential, which is kind of offensive. I remember being offended by it. I'm like, wait a minute here. You're saying that Anderson Cooper is essential and I'm not. You're saying that the mass media liars can go walk around and rat on people who are having Easter egg hunts. I mean, that's pretty much what was happening. It was like, wait a minute, we have a two-tiered society now. We have the essential and the non-essential. It almost makes it sound like we're useless breathers. Oh, useless breathers must stay home. Carbon super spreaders, which is the next thing. I mean, you thought being a virus super spreader, no, now it's just carbon super spreader, which is really just a way of saying you're alive, and they're mad at you for it. All these climate Gretas, they're mad at you for literally for breathing. All right, I have a few voicemails to get to.
You trust the coroner's office? You trust their findings? That's like one of the main little controlled offices, dude.
Okay. This person said, you trust the coroner's office. You trust their findings. That's like one of the main little controlled offices, dude. I know what he's talking about. He's referring to my claim that embalmers would never see bodies with exceptionally abnormally clotted veins, because if there were such an anomaly, it would be found in the morgue first, in an autopsy. And the reason why the people at the funeral home wouldn't see it, that is the embalmers, is that a body that's been autopsied has its arteries cut, meaning they have to do a multi-point injection, meaning drainage isn't the main issue anymore, and you wouldn't be dealing with that because when they're chopping it up, that's when the drainage is happening. It's losing most of its blood before it makes it to the funeral home. My point being, if there were any anomaly, such as massive clotting, it would be found, and it would be found there and noted, if at all. The embalmer is not going to get this same experience because, of course, if they get somebody in their embalming room that is full of some kind of anomalous clotting or whatever, as is being reported by Stu Peters, well, then that wouldn't be the presumptive cause of death. Because, of course, if there was an unnatural death, they would have gone through the autopsy room first. My point being, again, is this. Embalmers are not insiders. They don't have the information to make these bold claims that are being made. And as a former embalmer, I mean, I can tell you that clotting is a natural part of the process. Basically, your job is to pull the clots out to maintain constant circulation of the fluid that's being injected into the carotid artery, and then you're pulling the clots out of the jugular with forceps. It's like a routine thing. In fact, you have to actively massage the extremities in order to force the clots out. That's just a normal thing when you die. Your blood's not circulating, it's congealing, among other things. And I remember many instances of seeing very large fibrous, things that weren't the cause of death. And I always, even very, very aged people, like 90-year-olds, and like, wow, that was in that person. Amazing. Human body's amazing. But what you're seeing, and you're going to hear about this more in the coming days as the documentary Suddenly Dead comes out, are these ridiculous claims that embalmers are noticing something. And I'm saying, again, if it was an unnatural death, the embalmer's not going to be the first one to see that body and see the blood, and it would be the coroner's office. My point being, I don't buy this theory that bodies are showing up with these extreme clots. And it's not about me trusting the coroners. It's just that I know the chain of custody that a body goes through when it's a natural versus an unexpected death. and embalmers would be the last to know. Got another voicemail. This one's interesting. I believe this is a voicemail from Kenny Edward, the son of Dennis Edwards from the Temptations. He left a few messages. Let me go ahead and play this because I think he wanted me to get into something. Maybe one of you here knows more about it.
And do check out and utilize. You're getting kind of boring to the people. To me at least. It's you're just talking about them. Well, we're owned by Britain and the Jesuits and higher up than Trump, or they don't do nothing for us. So go to my site, Kenny Edwards, son of Dennis Edwards of the Temptations, and on YouTube, and check out more there. There are more there. Social Security number, about the birth certificate, about everything.
Okay, he recommends his site, Kenny Edwards, son of Dennis Edwards of the Temptations. The message goes on for several more minutes, but I'm going to take some time and go through his materials, and I'll reach out to him, and maybe he'll call back or I'll call him. I definitely appreciate the message. You can leave messages anytime, 833-311-1984. Again, 311 is when 1984 started. 311-2020. As prophesied in so many of these movies and Simpsons episodes and cartoons. We talked a lot about the World Economic Forum tonight. Let me go ahead and play this clip. One of our overlords.
Through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So individual carbon footprint tracker.
Individual carbon footprint trackers. Everything you eat, everything you drink, everywhere you go, every breath you take, they'll be counting. I said carbon super spreaders will be the next thing. One of their main goals, they want to have net carbon zero, World War Zero, net carbon zero by 2030. What do you think that means? If they want to cut our collective carbon footprint in half, it means travel half as much, eat half as much. I think that's what it means. It means live in a shanty town. It means don't do your laundry, stop showering. It means do with less. Meanwhile, these guys who tell you to do with less fly around in private jets. It's quite remarkable. This climate hysteria is at an all-time high, which is why they're definitely going to start censoring any kind of criticism. And of course, they've told us many times that it's going to heat up, then it's going to freeze, it's always changing. They're always moving the goalpost. But we're the conspiracy theorists. We're the ones spreading dangerous misinformation when their true believers are the ones who are running out there and setting themselves on fire. A few more small points here. Fact check. USA Today did this a few days ago. Antarctica is not an ice wall. Yeah, this is from November the 16th, 2022. Antarctica is an ice wall that surrounds the flat Earth. Flat earthers have been circulating for years. And a recent post adds another element, a claim that the world's surrounded by an ice wall. I'm kind of surprised that USA Today has taken the time to deal with this. Antarctica is a continent in the southern hemisphere. Satellite data shows that it does not extend around the Earth. In addition, an ice wall would not be sustainable. Okay, wouldn't be sustainable. My point in bringing this up is we've been talking about Agent Smith's gatekeeping, reality reinforcement, and it just seems like every once in a while they have to update everybody on the correct beliefs and make sure that all the Agent Smiths have their lines. Oh, if somebody says, hey, that moon landing looks kind of fake, you can instantly jump to this. You can fact check them. And now fact checking is reality denialism enforcement. They got to make sure you're denying the right realities. Things are definitely topsy-turvy through the looking glass. By the way, Trump's announcement for his 2024 run was 666 days after he left office. And the speech went on for a rambling 66 minutes. 666 and 66. Nothing to see there. All right, this has been great. We will continue tomorrow. I want to say special thanks to PTrippa103 and all of the others. Every one of you that comments, shares, and subscribes. We are a vibrant think tank, and I really see nothing but expansion into the future. You can see how they shoot down a server, and we're back. They pulled us off 25 podcasting platforms. We reconstitute. It's becoming increasingly difficult for them to keep us from being visible on all platforms, and that's kind of been the purpose. I realized when we started this channel that we're venturing into areas that are just going to be increasingly censorable as they turn the minds of the masses off of open-minded conjecture, and I think we've evolved, aptly to the conditions, and we've consistently surrounded ourselves and we've brought into our midst people who are adept at weaponizing memes like nowhere else. This is the only true counterculture, if you think about it. When it comes to the world stage, everything is world stage reinforcement, reinforcing nihilism, misanthropy. We're all going to die. We all should die. Useless breathers. Let's count how many breaths you're taking. You had too many breaths. You don't have any true counterculture, and that's because they don't want people going against the mob. It's based on peer pressure and fashion. They use fashion to enforce fascism, and it's very effective. But anyway, here's a case in point. This is Chief Crow and the Flat Earthworms, Mask of the Beast. We'll be back tomorrow morning, and sign up for the newsletter. I'll put a link below. That way you can get the archives once they're processed.
Auto-believers of the television programming. A 33 with a double E, yeah. WWF. Now you're out of breath.